have been looking at the kind of the history of magical thinking and where it starts to go wrong. And for my money, where it starts to go wrong is monotheism. I mean, if you look at the history of magic, you've got its origins in the caves. You've got its origins in shamanism, in animism, in a belief that everything around you, every tree, every rock, every animal, was inhabited by some sort of essence, some sort of spirit that could perhaps be communicated with. You would have had some central shaman or visionary who would have been responsible for channeling ideas that were useful to survival. By the time you reach the classical civilizations, you can see that this has formalized to a degree. The shaman was acting purely as an intermediary between the spirits and people. He was in his position in the village or community, I should imagine, very much like a spiritual plumber. You know, that people in the group would have had their own roles. The person who was best at hunting would have been a hunter. The person who was best at talking to the spirits, perhaps because he or she was a bit crazy, a bit detached from normal material world, then they would have been the shaman. And they would not have been masters of a secret craft. They would have simply been dispensing their information throughout the community, because it was believed to be helpful to the community. When you get the actual classical cultures emerging, this has been formalized so that you've now got pantheons of gods, and each of those gods will have a priest caste that will act to a certain degree as intermediaries who will instruct you in the worship of that god. So the relationship between humans and their gods, which could be seen as the relationship between humans and their highest selves, that was still a very direct one. When Christianity comes in, when monotheism comes in, then all of a sudden you've got a priest caste moving between the worshipper and the object of worship. You've got a priest caste becoming a kind of spiritual middle management between humanity and the divine within itself that it is seeking. You no longer have a direct relationship with the Godhead. The priests don't really necessarily have a relationship with the Godhead. They've just got a book that tells you about some people who lived a long time ago who did have a direct relationship with the Godhead. And that's all right. You don't need to have miraculous visions. You don't need to have gods talking to you. In fact, if you do have any of that stuff, you're probably insane. You know, in the modern world, that stuff doesn't happen. The only people who are allowed to talk to gods, and in a very kind of one-sided way, are priests. Monotheism is, to me, a great simplification. I mean, the Kabbalah has a great multiplicity of gods, but at the very top of the Kabbalistic diagram, the Tree of Life, you have this one sphere that is absolute God. The monad, something that is indivisible, you know? And all of the other gods, and indeed everything else in the universe, is a kind of emanation of that God. Now, that's fine. But it's when you suggest that there is only that one God at this kind of unreachable height above humanity, and there is nothing in between, you're limiting and simplifying the thing. I mean, I tend to think of paganism as a kind of, as an alphabet, as a language. It's like all of the gods are letters in that language. They express nuances, shades of sort of meaning, or certain subtleties of ideas. Whereas monotheism, it tends to be just one vowel, and it's just something like, ooh, it's this monkey sound. You can almost imagine the gods becoming frustrated, contemptuous that with all this richness of spiritual concepts that are available, why reduce it to one plaintive single note that the utterer does not even understand?